Crap. Hey everybody, what's going on? Welcome to an all-new Talkin Movies. As always, I'm your host, the real Geno Reynolds, and today we're going to be talking about the reboot of Hellboy. And I warn you, there will be spoilers here. I have to talk about everything in this movie. Firstly, though, for most of you that know this already, but this is not a continuation of the Guillermo del Toro films. It is a reboot. That being said, you're probably going to wish that Del Toro was allowed to finish his trilogy. What this movie is about is a lot of things, to be honest. They try to tell so many stories in this, but the main story is Nimue the Blood Queen. We see her history and how King Arthur used Excalibur to stop her and chop her to pieces and spread her body out throughout the world to where she couldn't come back together. And then we move to the present time where followers of her are trying to put her back together. And also we get introduced to Hellboy, and he has to, after doing a bunch of other things, has to go on a mission to stop her from being completed and taking over the world. But boy, it takes a while to get to that part. Wow, this movie, it covers a lot. And that's probably one of this movie's biggest downfalls, is that it's trying to tell too many stories. Now, don't get me wrong. It's taking a lot of what was in the comics, and it's in the movie. The connections to King Arthur with Excalibur, and Hellboy being a descendant of Arthur, and Arthur beating the Blood Queen. It's taking this, all that stuff, plus it's taking a few different stories from the Hellboy comics. The Blood Queen story, the stuff about where he came from. It teases the future of things like that we've kind of already seen in the Del Toro movies with Rasputin. There's so much going on here. And yes, it does come together in the end per se, but the movie's just kind of all over the place with its plot, that I feel it was very unfocused. So that's one of the biggest things that I had an issue with in this movie. The second thing was the humor. This movie tries so hard to be funny, and it's just not funny. Just being vulgar and throwing out quote-unquote clever puns is not funny. There's got to be a method. There's got to be a method to the madness. And really, just, there was one funny scene in this movie, and I'll talk about the scene in a minute, but it's the mid-credit scene, because oh boy, this movie has a mid-credit scene and an end-credit scene. They're going all in on this one. So yeah, it wasn't funny at all, and it tried. The script for this, yes, again, it follows a lot of the Hellboy lore, but the overall script is awful. I mean, just some of the things they say, and just how they get from point A to point B to point C. It's just, you find yourself losing interest. I mean, there's some cool ideas, because again, it's based on the Hellboy comics, but with the bad humor, the bad script, the story being all over the place, plus the CG, oh my god. The CG is either dated or just looks fake for most of it. There's a couple times where the CG looks good, but man, a lot of this movie looks like it was shot on a green screen. It's that feeling you get when you go from the Del Toro movies, which yes, they had some CG in the Del Toro movies, but they used it sparingly. I remember when I talked to Doug Jones about CG and Del Toro's use of it, he said Del Toro looked at it like this: if it's either too small or too big for someone to play it, then you use CG. Other than that, creature work. And you know, it might have been Brian Steele when I talked to him. It was one of those two. I talked to them in the same weekend, so you know it's hard to remember. But the lack of creature work in this, it's just painfully obvious. It's like when you go from those movies to this movie is like going from the original Star Wars to the prequels. It's where everything's CG now, and it's just not good. I mean, some of the designs are cool, but they feel dated, or they just feel like they're not there. Those are some big gripes about the movie. I mean, there are some positives about this. I mean, I'm not going to say that David Harbour was better than Ron Perlman, because he wasn't. But here's the thing. David Harbour would have been pretty good had he had a good script. He would have been fine. I mean, I'd still think I would prefer Ron Perlman, but I mean, the look of him, the makeup and everything, I thought looked pretty good. There was a few times that the face and the body were different shades of red, and that was a little a little distracting, but you know, I thought he did a fine job. Ian McShane as Professor Broom, he was fine, but he was there to be Ian McShane. And I'm not talking like John Wick Ian McShane where he's just kind of calm, which he was at times, and those parts worked. But when he just decided, I'm going to have a foul mouth and be Al Swearingen, Ian McShane, it's just, I don't know, it fell out of character for Professor Broom. I thought Mila Jovovich was just a really generic villain. I mean, there was nothing special there. There was nothing special about what she said, how she acted. She just felt like I'm in a movie. And I'm going to pronounce this character's name wrong probably, but Gruagach, the pig man, the effects on him, I mean, they were decent. The design was cool, but there were times where he was shrinking and growing, and it just looked really fake. The side characters of Alice and Ben Daimio, they're fine. I did like Alice. Okay, I mean, she's like a psychic, and Daimio, we find out, he shapeshifts into a poorly CG'd like cheetah man. And those parts are fine, but they're not great. There's really just not a ton of memorable characters, except one. This movie did something that they didn't get to do in the Del Toro movies. And I think they would have gotten to it in the third one. But this movie got to introduce Lobster Johnson. The big story about that in the Del Toro days, everyone wanted Bruce Campbell to be Lobster Johnson, and Bruce Campbell even recorded voiceovers for the Hellboy video game as Lobster Johnson. And apparently, I guess they never got released, or he had issues getting paid for them or something, because I remember when I met Bruce Campbell and had him sign a picture of Lobster Johnson, I didn't know this, and he seemed really a little put off that I had him sign that. He didn't get real mad, but he seemed put off when I did that, and I didn't understand at the time until I did research, because I had seen the clips on YouTube, and I thought he did a really fun job, and, you know, I wanted to see him play it. So I thought that'd be something interesting for him to sign instead of the 50,000th picture of Ash, you know? And anyway, so I've been waiting for this character. I've always liked the character of Lobster Johnson. I even have the toy of the Ghost of Lobster Johnson. And they finally introduced him. When he popped up on screen, I'm like, this is awesome. And Thomas Hayden Church is playing him. And when I mentioned well, see, yeah, I have to set this up because, okay, in the Del Toro Hellboy movies, we have the story of Rasputin and them, and they show them raising Hellboy or bringing Hellboy into this dimension and everything. We get this again. We see it again. I mean, it's almost, I'm not going to say it looks exactly the same, but it pretty much just feels like the same thing. I mean, even Cronin is sitting there. He doesn't do anything, but, you know, he's there just standing there in his gas mask, you know. And we have Rasputin, and they raise him and everything. Well, Lobster Johnson shows up there, even though I don't believe that's how it is in the comics. I think he died before that event. But he became like a legend that Hellboy grew up to like love. So anyway, Lobster Johnson's there, and yes, he even has the claw on his hand and everything, and it's cool. But he shows up in the mid-credit scene as a ghost to Hellboy, basically teasing the next adventure. And that part is hilarious, just because of the way that Hellboy fanboys out. And it's like, man, I wish the rest of the movie would have felt like this, you know, because it didn't. So that, for me, seeing Lobster Johnson and Thomas Hayden Church was really good as him. He just fit the role, and seeing him in the movie was a big positive for me. But yeah, man, this movie definitely goes all in when it comes to we have more stories to tell, even though they threw so many stories into this one. Because it takes forever to really get into the main story, because it seems like every character has a setup flashback. I mean, Hellboy gets a flashback. The Blood Queen gets a flashback. Grugach gets a flashback. Alice gets a flashback. Daimyo gets a flashback. I mean, just everyone gets a flashback. And it just takes forever to set up all these characters. And that, again, it's just kind of all over the place story-wise. What's funny is they have the Baba Yaga stuff. And what was funny is when they mentioned Baba Yaga, all I could think is, man, I'd rather be watching John Wick 3 right now. Heck, I'd rather be watching 1 and 2 right now. When I wasn't thinking I'd rather be watching the the Ron Perlman Hellboy movies instead. Again, this movie has some positives, and I'm not saying I hate this movie, but am I a little put off? See, I gave this movie a chance. Of course I wanted to see Del Toro be able to finish his trilogy. I wanted to see what happens with how Abe deals with the loss of the princess. I wanted to see how Hellboy and Liz did as parents. I wanted to see how they would deal with the end of the world stuff. I wanted to see what Del Toro had in mind for that, but Mike Mignola, the creator of Hellboy, just wasn't going to let it happen. Oh, and some things I forgot. Again, if I'm going to spoil it, I'm going to spoil it. They tease Abe Sapien at the end of the movie, because of course they do. I wasn't surprised by that, because you have to give us some more characters we know. And Abe, if anybody other than Hellboy is memorable from the Del Toro movies, it's Abe Sapien, Doug Jones. And they just tease it by, I mean, I saw who they were fighting, and it's like, oh, they're going to tease Abe. And sure enough, they show a tank and a hand goes right on the glass, and it's like, hey, there's Abe. And so yeah, see, here's the thing about this movie. And now is when I'm going to really compare it to the Del Toro movies. The reason I like the Del Toro movies, other than from like a technical standpoint, is you care about the characters. They make you care about the characters. You get to know Hellboy, and you get to know Liz, and you get to know Abe, especially in the second one, when he falls in love. You get to care about these characters. You care what happens to them. In this one, I mean, you don't really care. It's just here they're going, you know, beat by beat by beat throughout the story. And I mean, they even cover, you know, they even in this movie they even begin the apocalypse, right? You know, when Hellboy grabs Excalibur and the crown goes on his head and the horns grow and he goes into the mindless state of the Conqueror. They even start the apocalypse. I mean, creatures come up from the ground and start slaughtering people in horrible CG. I mean, they just cover so much. And I mean, I know that the Del Toro movies, the third one was going to deal finally with apocalypse. They built it up throughout 3 movies or throughout 2 movies, and we're going to deal with it in the third movie. But this one just, it wanted to rush through it, and it even, again, it teases the future with, in the mid-credit scene, the end of the movie with Abe Sapien, the mid-credit scene with Lobster Johnson's ghost, and then even though they don't show him, they show Baba Yaga, and she is talking to someone, and she says, "I'll finally let you die. Basically, if you help me and rip out Hellboy's eye," because he made a deal for his eye, and he reneged on the deal with her. She's making a deal. She goes, "You take care of Hellboy, I'll let you die." And that's Rasputin. So they're just going to do Rasputin again. So we'll probably get Rasputin and Cronin and stuff that we've already seen done really well in the first Hellboy movie. So heck, are they gonna do a third one and do the Golden Army? I mean, this movie was just frustrating. It was frustrating to watch because it was trying to tell too many stories, and it could have been good if you had a better script, would have used more practical effects. I'm not saying you have to be just like Del Toro, but if you're going to use effects, they better be good, and the effects in this were not good. I would have been maybe a little more forgiving, but then again, the script is bad and the humor is bad. And it's just trying to tell too many stories. I couldn't get connected with the characters other than what I was already connected with them. It's just like any new character you don't really care too much about. I mean, and like I said, the effects, the idea of Alice being able to talk to the spirit of someone that's dead, the idea is cool, but the effects are crap. And it just takes you out of the story. There's a scene where she brings someone back to life to give Hellboy a pep talk, and it looks like you CG'd someone's head on a horribly CG body. It's just awful. This movie, I maybe would watch it again just to make sure I had all of the 5,000 different facts that it's trying to give me if a sequel comes out. But if a sequel never comes out for this, I would probably never watch this one again. And I just want to know, I mean, fans are seem split on it. Critics are destroying it. I'm giving it some credit for some things, but a lot of it just feels like a waste of potential. Because again, David Harbour probably would be a great Hellboy given a good script. I mean, we finally get Lobster Johnson. But, you know, you got a shoddy villains, whether it be by effects or just the characters, you just don't care. You know, some characters die in this, you don't care. Because you don't get connected to the characters. You don't get emotionally involved. When we've already had 2 movies where you can get emotionally involved with these characters, despite how strange of characters they are. I mean, some of the most human characters in the Del Toro Hellboy movies are the non-human characters. And it's sad. It's just really sad that this movie just wastes so much potential. And I mean, I can't even recommend it. I mean, maybe a rental when it comes out, but it's honestly not worth seeing on the big screen. That's going to be all for this edition of Talkin Movies. If you like what you've heard here, please feel free to comment in the comment section below whether you want to talk about this Hellboy movie or the Del Toro Hellboy movies. And please subscribe to the Real Geno YouTube channel and give this video a like. Until next time, I am your host, the Real Geno, Geno Reynolds. See you later.